Alright, Honest Cassie here with another vlog. Today I'm going to talk about R2P2. So Raid 2 and Hoji from the starters. I have never sat down and actually used the deck, so I felt that this was a pretty interesting time to try to discuss what I think of it from the opposite side. So, because like, once you play the deck, like, you can have a better understanding, and I think the thing here is that, like, you want to be able to make conjectures without having actually played the deck, just from, you know, potentially looking at deck lists, and like having played against it a couple times in general, and then I'll reevaluate once I get some reps in with the deck. So the first thing I want to start off with is the fact that their removal tends to be very lacking. What I mean is, like, so, like, sure, they have access to deflect, but because they're red-blue, guard is a bit worse. It's still fine, but it doesn't have, like, the... Holy crap, this guy's trying to kill himself. Person crossed halfway through the street. Like in the middle of traffic. And then just stood there on the yellow lines. Kind of nutty. And then this thingy in the back is my ladder. I just bought it because I'm moving the stores. Alright, so back to what I was saying. Sorry, R2P2 has no doesn't have like the normal removal that you'd see, because one, they're hero, and two, hero's probably the best answer for that one. And then because they're not mono blue, things are much tougher on them. So guard is very questionable, but it's used because they have so many melee weapons. So between Ray and the melee weapons, you can do stuff. So, but it's harder to mask because of that. And then they can't really use force misdirection unless they're fine with it pretty much being for like a melee match, because the normal weapon lineup is like Ancient Saber, potentially Shotos. Lipo should be like a 2 of in there, auto, Ray's lightsabers in there. So like on that stuff, they're looking at pretty much blank, shield, melee, and then resource. So like there'll be times where you'll be able to hit 2 with it, but you don't get to hit it after like making your opponent reroll several times, which is where some of the benefit with it is. Because like if Cannon's sitting there with the 1, then you're like casting an upgrade on Qui-Gon, and then you're doing like a loot protection, then tapping loot protection, then activating Qui-Gon. Like, that's like 4 sets of actions. Your opponent could have re-rolled by then or rolled out all their dice and have known none the wiser. Whereas if you're sitting there passing with a, you know, a range or a melee showing, and like let's say you had like a modifier out as well, it's kind of like, all right, well, do they have force misdirection or is this guard? If it was guard, they might have, you know, resolved the base damage and then left the rest up for guard, or they could potentially waiting to see if you have something they need to guard before actually resolving the damage. So like for R2P2, it's much harder for them to mask some of their removal, especially since like hero doesn't have real 0 cost removal, or like doesn't have he doesn't like you, doesn't have doubt. So so it's much tougher on them. Like just guard, so dice in the pool, and then everything else costs like 1. So back to how they kind of play out. So the deck seems pretty much kind of like a consistent tank deck. So you have like cautions, so that's worth about 3 health, provided, you know, there's no intimidate, or like some way to bypass them, like Axe, Viper Axe. You have field medics for 2 health, which is about right for like what removal does. So outside of being able to snake a base die, or, you know, grab like a Palpatine die, that's very efficient. Then you've got Poe's special, which will gate a shield and either get himself consistent, or, you know, get yourself consistency for damage, or screw with the opponent's dice, which is good. Honor Guard, which is a very slow piece of removal, but with what you're expecting from the deck as far as being really slow with like focus sides and just taking your time to do stuff, like that's very solid. Now I'm trying to think what else. So like deflects, they might have overconfidence randomly. They're pretty much based on the put a bunch of shields up and heal my health. Ancient Lightsaber heals as well, like later in the game. So there's many interesting things from that perspective, but that they're severely lacking the remove actual damage dice, which can cause them problems for very particular decks. Those of which run things like actual vibro knife, which can like bypass shields. If there's a way if someone has a way to manipulate like the vibro knife, then they can actually, you know, sneak in like 4s and 5s unblockable through the shields, and that cuts down a lot of stuff for the deck. And then like Palpatine, because they can't actually touch the dice. Palpatine's going to be hitting for like 4s and 5s when he's resolving, because he's going to get shields to prevent your damage, and then do 2, or, you know, hit for 3 and then 2 more. So those are some potential weaknesses for the deck. Overall, though, they do run Sound the Alarm. I think Sound the Alarm is actually primarily there for the Rainbow matchup, because there's just too much dice and they don't have a removal. So what they do is they just kind of like let the opponent like re-roll and fix, and then they'll, you know, like use post special to change like a die side, then they'll re-roll again or whatever, and then you just sound the alarm and flip to blow them out. Because there's very limited re-rolls there. If they're spending time removing your dice, then their hand is also a bit jacked up. So R2P2, from my perspective, seems more like a tank deck. The dilemma there is that either guy can go win the game after, and there aren't many decks that can do that. The other weird part is that, like, Ray's entire die minus the 2 damage is kind of negligible. Like, you can pretty much ignore that entire die minus 2 damage. Like, the 1 damages add up, but you're not going to sit there and use a piece of removal on the 1. On the 2s you would. And outside of that, like, whatever, they discard your hand, they shield their resource, so you have to move on with your life. Poe's die, on the other hand, is... let's see, it's almost entirely annoying. So like the worst side, I guess, on it is actually the resource side, or the one ranged. And so the 2 focus is always going to represent, or should normally represent, about an increase of like what 2 to 3 damage. And what I mean by that is this: so in the situation where you're being slow and dirtily, your opponent claims, if you have a Poe 2 focus and then you have any other 2 dice, you're representing max damage on those dice. So Poe's blaster is going to represent 3. Poe's other die is going to represent 2. Any of Ray's dice are going to represent 2. Handcrafted light bow is going to represent 3 plus based on the number of shields. So it, you know, if they have 3 shields, like, that's a 5 damage to Qui-Gon. Any of the other upgrades, Ancient Lightsaber can represent 3, provided that you have a base side somewhere. So, like, Poe's actual dice is relatively scary, providing that your opponent can't remove anything after you've used it. So normally you leave it there until you're ready to claim, or right at the end, you move it to, like, okay, you know, Light Bow to special, Poe Blaster to special, or Poe Blaster to special, and then Poe's other die to 2. So even if they take 1, like, you don't have a severe backlash. So it pretty much represents another 2 damage side, minus the fact that any removal after using it is like pseudo blowout level. But since it's 2 focus, then you still have, like, leftover damage in theory. So anything like doubt, he doesn't like you, whatever, should be used after the focus side is used. And then Poe's special is questionably weaker and better than the double focus side, because any of the Poe's lightsaber, the handcrafted light bow, is in an immediate usage of that die. So you're representing scary shit the entire game. So, like, if a light bow's in play, it doesn't matter what side it's on, provided that it doesn't just miraculously get removed by your opponent's die right away, then we're looking at, you know, Poe activate, get a shield, so that's worth 1 health, and then flip this broken thing to a 3 in Smash for 3, or in Lightbow's case, versus like the shield decks, you know, somewhere between 3 to 5. and so like that's pretty scary. So like a lot of those matchups, I've only played against it, I think, with Rainbow number 5. I'm just gonna give up on trying to call it Rainbow number 5 because everyone's just calling it Rainbow 5, so I give up. I'll just call it Rainbow 5s, or I'll just make a new name. So yeah, from that perspective, I always just try to eat that Poe Blaster or handcrafted Lipo die, and then like Poe can go do whatever he wants. The hard part is that once he gets the second upgrade down, he shows a special on that, and he's representing off either one. So now you can't really eat either of those dice, because if you eat one, he'll do the other. And then like, all right, well, do you now just eat Poe's actual special thing to force him to roll into the actual damage? And like that doesn't feel great either. So one of the big things is to make sure that Poe doesn't get suited, because if Poe ends up with, you know, like Shoto, handcrafted Lipo, and Raise, or his own Dameron Blaster, or even just like a Force Solution, like I guess we don't even care about Shoto. He can be representing big chunks of damage now. So between that and like his special, the shield, and then like the field medics, you can be in a world of hurt, because you're looking at 3s coming from those dice at a very consistent clip, as opposed to anything else, because he may not even keep a 1 range showing on his die, depending on whether, like, if he's broken, needs more, then like maybe he rerolls. But if not, like every part of his die becomes much scarier. So like later game, super stacked Poe or super suited Poe is nuts. On the other side of the spectrum, and this is hard to tell because you really don't know what's in the opponent's list, is Shoto. So now, if let's say you went and killed Poe, so they're gonna give up on the Poe Blaster. So now we're looking at either Ancient Saber or Raised Lightsaber, or Lipo and or Shoto. And at the situations where Rey is starting to activate with Shotos, it's with a single Shoto, it's better than Qui-Gon, because Qui-Gon had to gain the shield to throw it for 1, whereas Rey is getting to keep the shield and do the 1. So in like that situation is much more frustrating, because if you're trying to, let's say, deal through double Shotos, she's getting 2 health when activating, dealing 1, so it's a 3-point damage swing every time they activate. And now we're referring to like a later game situation, so it's not like you have 8 million dice. You're probably going to have 1 guy, maybe 2 and a 3-guy deck in those situations. So you have, what, 5 dice? And then she probably has 5 dice, because whoever you focus, they're putting upgrades on the other person. Then, like, if they don't already have Raised Lightsaber, and you're like trying to do damage, they can plop it down, get 2 more shields, and like it's tough, very, very tough. So it's hard to decide who to attack, and I think at this point who to attack is dependent on who's getting an upgrade. So let's say in a situation where Poe gets his Dameron Blaster in round 1, I think you need to go kill Poe. If someone throws a Lipo on Rey, you got to go kill Rey. If like a blank Shoto hits Rey, you have to go for Rey. It's harder to kill them, but the thinking here is that by actually executing that character, you've removed the additional dice. Rey's really hard to get through, because let's say they start with an Ancient, and then, you know, they put a shield on her. Like, we're looking at 12 plus the other 2. If a Force Solution comes down, like that's like 17 damage you have to do to kill her. So like sometimes you think, all right, well, I'll just kill Poe, but can you just kind of think of it like Qui-Gon? If Qui-Gon has 3 upgrades, can you actually beat him? And like that's where some of the issue comes in, because the deck is very consistent from a die standpoint. Like they can take what they got, they have the focus to fix stuff, they have the special to do their tricks. They're just trying to stay alive long enough to beat you, because they have actual 3 cost upgrades. If someone sticks a 2 and double 3 cost upgrades with the way the format is now, just remember FN rolling out with like a Z6, a rocket, and like a vibro knife or anything. Like that shit's scary, because there's just so much damage that comes down. Whereas in the situations where it's like a holdout, an LL30, and I don't know, like a DH, like there could be potential for big damage, but you have like pay sides, there's a bunch of 1s and 2s, a bunch of modified. The opposite spectrum is very high damage. The light bows are looking at 2, 2, 3. Ray's saber is 2, 3 for resource plus 2. The Shotos kind of suck from a damage perspective, but you're okay with that because you're gaining a free shield. So like in theory, you're looking at like 2 damage plus 2 damage, 3 damage. Oh, sorry, plus 3 damage. What, like double shield, resource shield? Like out of that die side. So it also makes it so that they can use guards. So like as a whole, the deck seems very consistent and scary. It's not like there's anything super broken there. Using special to do a special is pretty much at the same speed of C3PO already being out, and then just popping that to crack a light bow or a Dameron blaster. And that's the other thing, they still have access to C3PO. So it's an interesting deck to play against. I didn't have any issues in the Galactic qualifiers, but it doesn't mean that I steamrolled them. Like, I didn't sit there and just like crush them. It is a much closer game than you would want. Most decks only have like one big guy, and then the leftover guy just you can just kind of punk him. Versus weaker players, you can probably get them to caution early before you've even resolved damage if you're threatening a bunch. So like there's just different situations you have to like kind of figure out what's going on. Sorry, I looked to the side because I saw a card just like not move, and then the other card came up and just like looked like they slammed right before it. But I guess I just kind of did to this Jeep because I poked at my eye. So overall, it doesn't seem like anything is just like, oh, this thing is absolutely broken, you can't stop it, you can't do any of it. It just seems really consistent from an annoyance side. And when you're going into a big tournament, consistency is very great. The only dilemma is that they have to actually be capable of killing fast. They don't have a way to get around Force Illusion, but they're also lucky in that they don't string in big chunks of 4 and 5s. Outside of the situations where they have like Shoto and then like an Ancient on a +3. So it's like it's you racing their tank, I guess is how I'd say it. If you have a bunch of dice, they can't really cope with it, so you can kill them. So like ramping makes sense. When they get to ramp, that can be a difficult thing because their upgrades are relatively scary. In the situation of like Rainbow versus them, you're both looking at like a round 2 kill. I don't think that can even feasibly kill Bala round 1, but it can do it round 2, and it can do it through shields just because of the access to light bow. So depending on what they do round 1, you're gonna have like different scenarios. Round 2, it's going to be very tough to keep him alive if you weren't able to prevent Ray's damage activation, because then you're looking at 2 free damage there. So even if you started with shield somehow, you're looking at 8 health. They probably still get like 3 damage maybe that first round. So like my thinking there is that it'd probably be something like cast Pole Blaster or do stuff. So if you took 3 there in addition to the shields, you're at 5. 5's going to be much easier for them to get rid of the next round. Or if you took 4, then you need to find a Force Illusion, because I don't know if Flank will do it. Like Flank will eat whatever die, but they tend to waste a die to fix another die. So Force Illusion tends to be much stronger there because you're getting the equivalent to 2 dice off the table plus 3 damage, whether it be like C3PO into Light Bow or Post Special into Pole Blaster or Light Bow. So keep that in mind. Force Illusion is very strong there in that match. But if you can kill their guy, untap, get to reactivate and actually use your dice, which is kind of hard to come by it sometimes, then you'll be in a good position. There are some subtle mind games there in the deck as well, and like realistically, if you can start with the friends in low places, I think you'd be in the better of the situations of the 2 decks. If you don't have a friends in low places, it can be tough. Or if you don't have a piece of removal, then you're having to use Night Sister, which is fine, but you can't you can't Night Sister the like Poe special into the Poe Blaster, because you hitting the Night Sister, I guess you Night Sistering could be like pseudo equivalent, but things could actually just get worse, because if they end up re-rolling and then hit like 2 and 1, you've taken 1 already, and then you're taking 3 more, so like you didn't do anything there. Whereas after they use it, then you're kind of in an okay place, because you can just kind of control the leftover dice. So yeah, like from the outsider's perspective, it looks like a very, very solid deck. It looks like it can just continually like threaten scary things. It doesn't look like it has a big round 1 outside of just like accelerating into, and then, you know, maybe like removing shields via light bow and stuff. So keep that in mind, and just start getting reps in with the deck, so you can kind of feel how they feel, or like know how they feel. They really don't like having 0 resources, but depending on what they're doing, they may not actually care. So it's relatively hard to gauge what's the best way to approach the deck. You guys should be seeing a best of 3 where I play Bobo, and it was, yeah, you'll just watch and find out. And yeah, I'm on tilt. That's all I can say. So I plan to get some more testing in versus it. I'll probably have to break out the deck at some point, but what I think my current goal is to bring back FN with Bala. I've been testing it with the 7th sister, as per request of Dr. Bear, and it seems okay, but it kind of seems like kind of almost exactly like how Poe Ray is, or R2P2. So like you start off pretty much not being able to do damage, like good damage at least. So 7 sisters dice only have 2 damage sides. You don't really want the 1 damage, but you take what you can get. The disrupt's good for threatening stuff, but you really don't want to resolve that either. And then you got shield and resource, because you're trying to protect whatever guy they're hitting, which is most likely FN. You're very likely to take shields from her dice and be content with it. On the ID9 droid, I'm just going to call it 7th droid because I forget the name all the time, we're looking at 1 damage, 1 focus, shield, resource, discard. I presume that I won't keep any blanks at any point in time, outside of this being like my second reroll or a second roll out of a die, and whether my hand is suitable for another reroll or not. So like in those situations, I tend to use the, you know, threaten the disrupt the whole game so that people can't accelerate. The 1 damage is fine, I'll take it. The focus is very helpful for, you know, finding my own resources or max damage off of dice when I need it. But if we take into consideration FN's in 7th die, we're outside of paying for a resource for the extra damage, which I'm not going to do. I'm looking at resource, shield, or 1 damage, which really isn't great. So the focus is not useless, but it's less useful, because on the same die we're looking at a 1 damage shield, disrupt. So the only thing we were missing was resource and discard. Now the big thing there is that because we're starting with 5 actual usable dice, that 5th die is a great utility die. Then on our first upgrade, it's the 6th die, and then when we get to roll out, it's our 7th. So you can start in a great place from there. You just don't get to hit for big chunks of damage, because all of your dice are really only worth 1. So if we take into consideration that we'll ignore the 7th droid die, so the ID9 droid gets ignored because it's probably not hitting damage. We're looking at about 4 value from our character dice, because we're not going to resolve a 2, and then whatever upgrades we get. So like the 2-drop upgrades in the deck are only like Ancient, Vibro, and the not Kylo Saber, what the hell is that? Crossguard. Crossguard is actually one of the scary ones in the deck, because the special is pretty beastly. So we have 6 2-drops, we're fine, starting with, and like Ancient does the protection, so like that's all gravy. But once again, we're pretty much looking at like 1 damage on The Ancient, we've got a +3, which could be great, but we're not guaranteed to hit actual base melee. Crossguard +2, and then Vibro +2. So like depending on what's going on, like we may be in a tough situation, and like trying to keep the +3 or +2 and reroll into it could just set us in negative situations where the opponent gets to like doubt our base die, and then we're trying to find it again. So in those situations, I tend to reroll. So we're not looking at huge amounts, but we're kind of going to attrition damage. So I'd say like between the resource sides, the shields, whatever, we're looking at 5 value, or 5 damage worth, maybe 6, because I'm going to assume that I may have disrupted somewhere, or I may like have a blink, which isn't bad per se. It's not amazing. Now, going into the subsequent round, we find like a Z6 or something, or get to like stick the second 2-drop, like things get much better. Our 3-drop wise is we're looking at Z6 and lightsaber, and then rocket launcher, and then our 2s are just the 2 drops I named already. So Ancient, Crossguard, and Vibro Knife. So the reason it's only 12 upgrades is 1, because they're trying to do more than that. It means if FN dies, we have a bunch of dead cards. And 2, that there's not enough space for it, because we have a lot of like cool tricks. So we get the double intimidate, we get the lightsaber throws. Then after that, we pretty much just go straight into like removal and staying alive. So force illusions, doubts. I think I have like 1 defect, 1 clash, because I'm not sure which way I prefer to do it. Like clash can be very good with like the Vibro and Ancient for representing crazy stuff, and then bypassing shields or just hitting really hard. I think I have overconfidence in there, maybe like sound the alarm. Like some of my rule suites is like straight up one-offs. There should be like the build version of it if you want to check out the exact list. But like for the most part, it seems like it operates okay. It's just you have to be relatively careful, because we only have 4 redeploys, so Z6 and lightsaber. So once those stick, those aren't switching out in most scenarios, and like we want to get 2 upgrades down, so that FN is very threatening. It's just that, like, let's say you start round 1 and you hit 2 of your 2 drops. The next round, you can't overwrite both of them for redeploys. So it gets tough. When you cast a rocket launcher, if you overrode a 2-drop, you can't immediately overwrite that into a redeploy. So, like, you have to make sure that you're staying alive, which you really can't quite guarantee. But, like, for the most part, it's been operating perfectly fine. Each of my 4 character dice have a shield side on it. Crossguard has a shield on it. Ancient has a shield on it. So I tend to get a lot of shields via those additional small like dice attritions. But when I take those, I am giving up damage, and you just have to like roll with the punches. Intimidates work very good. So like this could be a very good meta deck where if it was fighting against something that just hit really hard right away, I think it wouldn't be anywhere near good. But the way we're looking at like Qui-Gon Cannon being a great deck right now, R2P2 being a great deck right now, they don't hit hard at all. Or at least at the beginning, they hit kind of slow. So you can maintain pace with that same build-up. But your dice are actually just much scarier. Your character dice suck in comparison. But the fact that when you use like Z6 twice or Rocket twice, any of that stuff, like those are blowout rounds. Even the regular lightsaber, while it's not being great, if you have a base side to connect it with, you know, you've got 3 damage plus 2 damage, and then you've got a 2 unblockable. So that's all scary. And then the fact of the matter is that they all have redeploy. So unlike Qui-Gon and R2P2, who really only like redeploy is in Ray Saber, if you go after the guy getting the upgrades, you can actually just take those dice straight off the table. Whereas when FN dies, FN's character dice actually sucks donkey dick. So when he dies, he's shifting, you know, potentially 2 upgrades over to 7th sister, and now she has like a slot left over for like Ancient or Force Illusion or maybe even another upgrade, depending on how stuff went down. and then she can kind of like switch out into a rocket launcher if you know, you feel that's best, etc., etc. So it's pretty nice from that standpoint. Like, they going after the red guy. If they go after Seventh Sister, you can give her mild protection while you're doing things, and trying to kill an FN at the end is kind of obscene, because all of those dice are bonkers. Like, you're going to be hitting hard, and the rest of your hand's going to just be used up on like mitigating and reroll, which is how like a lot of the slow decks work out. They have a lot of mitigation, so at the beginning they can't mitigate much, and they kind of just take hits in the face. And then after that, they're looking at rolling out, you know, then they're just blowing out your dice. And if you're able to maintain the blue die alive, like, we're rolling in 6 dice with the Seventh Sister because of the droid die. Once again, the droid die is not balls to the wall amazing, but it does add minor annoyances. So, like, you know, shield, discard, you're perfectly fine with, and then focus and damage. Later on, the disrupt's not really usable. Just like how discard's not really great at the beginning, but that's perfectly fine. You take 3 dice when you got them. So there is some good attrition stuff there. And then I think I'm going to try to recheck out how Ibala FN First Order Stormtrooper is. I don't like being the weird deflect deck, or weird deck that gets deflected with a low amount of dice. So it's kind of tough, but FN's still that guy where if you resolve a rocket twice in a round, like, most decks do that amount of damage, like, in a full round, using a lot of their dice. And he's just like, nah, bro, this you know, this is gravy. This is just off me upgrading. So we're gonna see how that goes, especially since we're playing in a slower tank thing. I felt the Bala deck was very slow, but because it could just bust through shields with the Vibroax, it could be well situated for the current meta. Because they caution or do whatever, and then you're blasting them in the face for like 5 or 6. Most decks can't cope with that well at all. And it could just like end the game, because they think they're fine, they think they're safe, they're just hiding behind that. And then I talked about trying to build this weird pile of shit. And it's Rainbow FN with melee. And it's like Tusken Raider, Royal Guard, and FN. So it's only 3 dice. But the Royal protects the FN. The FN does his things. And then when he switches, redeploys over to Tusken Raider, Tusken Raider gets that whole like action cheat damage thing. So in a situation where you move like lightsaber Z6 over to him, and then like overwrite with a rocket launcher, then he's hitting for 3 or 4 pretty much instant speed when he rolls out, provided that doesn't roll on blank, which is pretty scary. So the deck could end up just being a complete pile of shit, but it could also actually just be solid. The tough parts for that deck is going to be the fact that you only have 1 resource side on your 2 dice before FN activates, meaning that first activation is probably going to be with whatever 2-drop that came down, which isn't an issue, because once again we're back to crossguard, lightsaber, ancient, vibro knife. There's no reason to run any of the guns there, even though Tusken Raider has a range side, and so does FN. We're not going to sit there and try to force down like F11E holdout X8. There's potential for, if we need an additional 2-drop, we can go something like LL30. But that's like few and far between, so I don't know how I feel about that. And then, like I said, the 3 drops we just talked about a second ago were lightsabers, Z6, and rocket. So like that's the intent as far as the deck is concerned. Oh, actually, sorry, they get Vibro also. Vibroax. That was the other thing. Tusken Raider with Vibroax, pretty scary as well. So I don't know if it'll be 13 weapons, 14 weapons, or what the plan is there, or whether maybe we just cut Rocket. But I think Rocket hits so hard and would be a complete menace on Tusken that we may keep it around. But that's kind of unknown. So we'll see where that takes us, and go from there. But I like the theory of getting in range back while still maintaining he doesn't like you and friends in low places. Bait and switch there is not as feasible, not as strong, because we're lower on resource sides and we'll probably try to keep those. But it could be an interesting thing from a health perspective, since we're looking at what 8, 8, and 11, so we're at 27 health. The one character die usually doesn't matter there from a damage perspective, because it normally doesn't hit very hard. But it is, like, over the course of 3 rounds, we're talking about a loss of 3 values, so damage, shields, resources, which may make it just complete and utter trash. But it would be interesting to pretty much see and go from there. If you were willing to go like red-blue, which I kind of hate the theory because then you just don't have axe for any reason. Let's say you wanted to give up 7 Sister, you could do something like Night Sister plus Stormtrooper, which have harder hitting actual sides, but then you have to decide whether you're a gun deck or a melee deck or what. You lose X8, you lose LL30, you lose He Doesn't Like You, Friends in Low Places, Bait and Switch, Backup Muscle. Like, those are a lot of very good cards to lose. But you would then have 4 dice, and FN would still be the target. You'd still have Night Sister to fix stuff, or like disrupt the opponent. So it could be an interesting deck there as well. But like, you lose Bala, but I think Bala's not as necessary right now in the current stage, because we're looking at 2 character decks again. If we somehow change back to 3 characters, Bala comes back with a vengeance. So we'll kind of just see how it goes from there. So this video ended up being a lot longer than I want, and I branched off into FN because I kind of just talk off the cuff and don't know what's going on. But I'm going to end the video here because 36 minutes is a lot amount of time. But we'll see where I get with double checking that FN, like where he is. Could potentially try to tweak out Kylo 2 FN a bit just to make sure, because like Kylo 2 his ability is very threatening with Qui-Gon being around. So like, between that and then trying to like block the damage, it seems like it could be in a very good place as well. 3 dice is very hard to use from a mitigation perspective, especially since like the cautions and shields and whatever make you not want to actually resolve like 1 damage sides and then re-roll and get stuff. But the Kylo ability is so good that like maybe you try it, because it could be good enough. There's that whole Kylo Anakin deck, which runs like Rise Again and like the Holocron package. But like, outside of that, how scary is the deck? Like, if you don't find Holocron, it's not super creepy. And Rise Again actually from the Qui-Gons and R2P2s, because they can't disrupt well, Rise Again's very good at calming down and reshaping the game a bit, because Mind Probe and Force Lightning can be blowouts against those decks. So, I don't know. Who knows? But we'll find it out, play it by ear. But this is interesting enough where the format is a little all over the place. As decks tighten up, I think there's much cuter stuff that can be done. Like, Feel Your Anger was always like a great blowout card, but it was very situational. So like, do you want to go that route with stuff like Rainbow 5s? Because like, you kind of just want consistency from them. But I guess if you want like blowouts, because there's just some matchups that are questionable, like, it's fine. It's also very good in the mirror, because there's just so much dice that they should probably hit 2 blanks when rolling out that many. But we'll kind of just play it by ear, see how it is. And, you know, just wanted to let you guys know, I'm sorry I couldn't get a bunch of gameplay videos out, but this should hopefully make up for it. And you guys have a great day. I really felt, baby.